Breaking news unfolding right now. U.S. airstrikes just beginning in Syria against ISIS. The Pentagon telling us they launched an aerial operation involving a mix of fighter jets, bombers, and Tomahawk missiles fired from ships in the region. ISIS fighters have seized control of large portions of Iraq and Syria, slaughtering thousands along the way and beheading 2 American journalists. Military officials haven't released details yet of the airstrikes, but say it is ongoing.
With Washington wading into another war in the Middle East, one iconic U.S. whistleblower says Americans are being kept in the dark about the risk of the latest intervention, and he called for more people to spill the beans. As RT's Amira David reports.
We heard Pentagon Papers whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg speak at a rare news conference here at the National Press Club. As the United States embarks on a new military campaign abroad, Ellsberg made a point to talk about the need for people to expose the information that could help de-escalate a war.
We're right on the edge, the leading edge of what the Times calls a slippery slope, aptly, into a large war in the Middle East. It's time for Congress to debate these issues fully, which it has not done. To be any use, it has to be an informed debate. It can't be limited to the lies of government officials or the silence. It has to rely on the kind of whistleblowers that did not exist to keep us out of Vietnam or Iraq. It was a lack of such whistleblowers that gave us those wars. And we need those whistleblowers right now. We need another Edward Snowden and many more of them, and Chelsea Manning, to inform Congress as to what this country is being asked to get into.
Ellsberg expressed concern that silence is tacit approval to the administration to move forward with its military campaign. Daniel Ellsberg is one of the most revered whistleblowers today. He's a former U.S. military analyst who released the classified Pentagon Papers to the New York Times in 1971. While he was the first to be prosecuted, more whistleblowers have been charged and prosecuted under the Obama administration than every previous administration combined. In Washington, Amira David, RT.
Last night that took place in 2 major sections of Syria, west of Aleppo, hitting the Khorasan group and the ISIS group as well.
Let's listen to the president. On my orders, America's armed forces began strikes against ISIL targets in Syria. Today, the American people give thanks for the extraordinary service of our men and women in uniform, including the pilots who flew these missions with the courage and professionalism that we've come to expect from the finest military that the world's ever known. Earlier this month, I outlined for the American people our strategy to confront the threat posed by the terrorist group known as ISIL. I made clear that as part of this campaign, the United States would take action against targets in both Iraq and Syria, so that these terrorists can't find safe haven anywhere. I also made clear that America would act as part of a broad coalition, and that's exactly what we've done. We were joined in this action by our friends and partners: Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Bahrain, and Qatar. America is proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with these nations on behalf of our common security. The strength of this coalition makes it clear to the world that this is not America's fight alone. Above all, the people and governments of the Middle East are rejecting ISIL and standing up for the peace and security that the people of the region and the world deserve. Meanwhile, we will move forward with our plans supported by bipartisan majorities in Congress to ramp up our effort to train and equip the Syrian opposition, who are the best counterweight to ISIL and the Assad regime. And more broadly, over 40 nations have offered to help in this comprehensive effort to confront this terrorist threat, to take out terrorist targets, to train and equip Iraqi and Syrian opposition fighters who are going up against ISIL on the ground, to cut off ISIL's financing, to counter its hateful ideology, and to stop the flow of fighters into and out of the region. Last night, we also took strikes to disrupt plotting against the United States and our allies by seasoned al-Qaida operatives in Syria who are known as the Khorasan group. Once again, it must be clear to anyone who would plot against America and try to do Americans harm that we will not tolerate safe havens for terrorists who threaten our people. I've spoken to leaders in Congress, and I'm pleased that there is bipartisan support for the actions that we're taking. America's always stronger when we stand united, and that unity sends a powerful message to the world that we will do what's necessary to defend our country. Over the next several days, I will have the opportunity to meet with Prime Minister Abadi of Iraq and with friends and allies at the United Nations to continue to building support for the coalition that is confronting this serious threat to our peace and security. The overall effort will take time. There will be challenges ahead, but we're going to do what's necessary to take the fight to this terrorist group for the security of the country and the region and for the entire world. Thanks. God bless our troops. God bless America.
Mr. President, are Americans in danger living in the United States?
The battle against ISIS terrorists has now expanded into Syria. President Obama ordered the first airstrikes against targets inside Syria tonight. Our David Martin is at the Pentagon now with the very latest. David?
Scott, the airstrikes began just minutes ago. Cruise missiles fired by U.S. Navy ships in the Red Sea, fighters flying off an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, and Air Force jets flying out of bases in the Persian Gulf are striking about 20 targets, ISIS targets, in northeastern Syria. The strikes, which will also include at least one Arab nation, are intended to destroy ISIS headquarters, supply areas, and training areas. And these strikes, Scott, will almost certainly do damage, but they will not defeat ISIS. That will take putting troops in on the ground, and it's going to take the Pentagon about a year to train and equip Syrian opposition forces to go in on the ground. So, Scott, the war against ISIS inside Syria is just beginning.
David, American aircraft and cruise missiles are flying at this moment, but you also mentioned that an Arab nation would be involved. What is the plan to have Arab countries involved in these airstrikes?
Well, you always want as many partners as you can possibly get, and to have Arab partners when you're striking an Arab country is the kind of coalition that the president has been trying to build. It is not exactly clear which Arab countries are taking part in this, and they may all publicly deny that they are participating.
David Martin with the latest news at the Pentagon tonight. David, thank you very much.
Breaking right now, airstrikes are underway in Syria to combat the extremist group ISIS.
It all started just over an hour ago. Details are scarce at this point, but here's what we know right now. As we take a look at a map of the area, they are targeting now up to 20 locations, mostly around the northern city of Raqqa.
The Pentagon says the operation involves warplanes from the U.S. and its partners, including Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. The mission includes a mix of fighter jets, bombers, and Tomahawk missiles fired from ships in the region.
The US and its allies have started airstrikes on Islamic State positions in Syria without any coordination with the country's government. President Obama authorized the attacks 2 weeks ago as part of a campaign to take out the jihadist militants threatening security in the region. The Pentagon hasn't released the exact locations of the airstrikes, but there are reports that among the main targets are Islamic State militant positions in Syria's northern city of Raqqa, a stronghold for the group in the country. Witnesses in the region do seem to back up this information. Well, for more on this, we can cross live now to Anastasia Chorkina, who is in New York for us. Anastasia, what further developments can you tell us?
Well, Andrew, what we do know, of course, is yes, the United States has begun its highly controversial airstrikes campaign over Syria, the plans for which were announced earlier this month. We do know, of course, that this comes after over 170 airstrikes have already been conducted over Iraq. We do know that these airstrikes began early Tuesday morning, local time in Syria, of course, and that the official goal of these airstrikes is to try to take out and destroy the group ISIS, which is, of course, this highly violent al-Qaida-bred terrorist group. And we know that the plan is, right now, the reported plan is to target at least 20 locations, including training bases and encampments, and that reportedly this campaign will last for at least throughout this week. But that's, of course, seems to be a very underestimated amount of time, considering the complicated situation on the ground. We do also know that the United States is the only non-Arab country that is participating in this campaign. Of course, it's spearheading this operation, but other countries include the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Jordan. And it has to be said that the legality of this campaign has been highly questioned throughout these last several weeks because certainly lots of questions are being asked about the lack of approval, not just from the Syrian government, which, unlike the Iraqi government, never approved or requested such airstrikes, but also from Congress representing the American people, of course, here in the United States, as well as the international community in the face of the United Nations. So lots of questions yet to be answered as this airstrike campaign begins over the legality, efficiency, risks, consequences, timeline of this whole operation. And certainly we do know that right now it's the United Nations General Assembly session week here in New York, where world leaders flock to the United Nations. And we do know that Barack Obama will be here on Wednesday to chair a Security Council meeting over this whole situation, where, of course, he's expected to try to promote this highly controversial campaign.
Thanks, Anastasia. That's RT's Anastasia Chorkina with the latest there, live from New York.
Told that there are between 20 and 25 targets. The planes that are flying, they are F-16s, B-1 bombers, as well as F-18s. Those F-18s would take off from the USS H.W. Bush, which is in the Persian Gulf. The F-16s would take off from bases around the region. But as you mentioned, the United Arab Emirates is flying in the lead as part of this coalition of Arab states. Saudi Arabia fighter pilots, as well as Jordanian, Bahraini fighter pilots. We also understand that much of the command and control, of course, is out of Qatar. So you have 5 Arab countries. This is almost unprecedented in terms of the history of U.S. warfare, in terms of the number of fighter pilots involved from Arab states in these airstrikes tonight. Shepard.
Jennifer, we know that Jordan to the east there has a terrible refugee crisis. 1.2 million people, according to the King of Jordan, have come across in there. It amounts to more than 12% of his population. He says they can't take any more. The other one that has a refugee crisis going on at the time is Turkey. And is there a chance, is there an understanding that Turkey will or will not be involved with this?
Well, it's very interesting, Shepard. We just heard today from the president of Turkey, who is in New York for the UN General Assembly. He spoke at the Council on Foreign Relations, and he was asked about how his diplomats who had been kidnapped and held hostage for the last 102 days by ISIS, how they were released over the weekend. Was there any money that changed hands? And he suggested that he was asked whether there was a prisoner release involved, and he was cagey, and it suggested that maybe there was a prisoner release involved. He ruled out that money had changed hands. But remember, Turkey has not allowed the U.S. to use its bases to go after ISIS in Iraq and Syria until this point, because they were concerned about those 46 diplomats and their children who were taken hostage by ISIS 102 days ago in Mosul. Those 49 diplomats, including 3 Iraqis, were released over the weekend. Now it will be very interesting, and the president of Turkey indicated that he will allow the U.S. to use their bases. That's going to be very significant in this war effort because, as you mentioned, Jordan is already flooded with refugees and is perhaps the most vulnerable of all the nations right now in terms of ISIS and its potential threat to the stability of that kingdom. So the fact that Jordan is involved tonight, very significant. The fact that Saudi Arabia has publicly said that it will allow the U.S. to train using bases inside Saudi Arabia, also a very significant move, because remember, these ISIS terrorists, they are going to strike back at these Arab countries, and all of these Arab countries know that. In the past, it's been very difficult for the U.S. to get public support from Arab countries for that very reason. But it looks like Turkey is on the verge of getting involved in this coalition and allowing, in fact, the President Erdogan said tonight at the Council on Foreign Relations that he did not like the implications in the press that his country was not, which, by the way, is a member of NATO, was not a part of this coalition. So expect for Turkey to step up in the coming days, Shepard.
Jennifer.
Good evening. Today, the United States continues to build a broad international coalition to degrade and ultimately destroy the terrorist group known as ISIL. As part of the air campaign, France will join in strikes against ISIL targets in Iraq. And as one of our oldest and closest allies, France is a strong partner in our efforts against terrorism, and we're pleased that French and American service members will once again work together on behalf of our shared security and our shared values. More broadly, more than 40 countries, including Arab nations, have now offered assistance as part of this coalition. This includes support for Iraqi forces, strengthening the Iraqi government, providing humanitarian aid to Iraqi civilians, and doing their part in the fight against ISIL. Here at home, I'm pleased that Congress, a majority of Democrats and a majority of Republicans in both the House and the Senate, have now voted to support a key element of our strategy, our plan to train and equip the opposition in Syria so they can help push back these terrorists. As I said last week, I believe that we're strongest as a nation when the President and Congress work together, and I want to thank leaders in Congress for the speed and seriousness with which they approach this urgent issue, in keeping with the bipartisanship that is the hallmark of American foreign policy at its best. And these Syrian opposition forces are fighting both the brutality of ISIL terrorists and the tyranny of the Assad regime. We had already ramped up our assistance, including military assistance, to the Syrian opposition. With this new effort, we'll provide training and equipment to help them grow stronger and take on ISIL terrorists inside Syria. This program will be hosted outside of Syria in partnership with Arab countries, and it will be matched by our increasing support for Iraqi government and Kurdish forces in Iraq. This is in keeping with a key principle of our strategy. The American forces that have been deployed to Iraq do not and will not have a combat mission. Their mission is to advise and assist our partners on the ground. As I told our troops yesterday, we can join with allies and partners to destroy ISIL without American troops fighting another ground war in the Middle East. The strong bipartisan support in Congress for this new training effort shows the world that Americans are united in confronting the threat from ISIL, which has slaughtered so many innocent civilians. With their barbaric murder of 2 Americans, these terrorists thought they could frighten us or intimidate us or cause us to shrink from the world, but today they're learning the same hard lesson of petty tyrants and terrorists who've gone before. As Americans, we do not give in to fear, and when you harm our citizens, when you threaten the United States, when you threaten our allies, it doesn't divide us, it unites us. We pull together, we stand together to defend this country that we love and to make sure justice is done, as well as to join with those who seek a better future of dignity and opportunity for all people. And today our strikes against these terrorists continue. We're taking out their terrorists, we're destroying their vehicles and equipment and stockpiles, and we salute our dedicated pilots and crews who are carrying out these missions with great courage and skill. As Commander-in-Chief, I could not be more proud of their service. As I told some of our troops yesterday, the American people are united in our support for them and for their families. And as we go forward as one nation, I'd ask all Americans to keep our forces and their families in their thoughts and prayers.
Major? Jeff, administration officials tell us the president will make the case for sending a limited number of special forces troops to Iraq. The president had insisted he did not want to put boots on the ground in this newly flaring conflict, but now believes special forces are necessary to develop better intelligence on the Sunni insurgents.
This is on Capitol Hill, where military leaders say the ISIS strategy may need to expand beyond airstrikes. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning. Well, the president's stated policy has been no U.S. troops on the ground, period. And yet, here on Capitol Hill, his top military advisor said he doesn't want to rule it out. In a Senate hearing Tuesday, Joint Chiefs Chairman Martin Dempsey said right off the bat, U.S. ground troops might be needed in the fight against ISIS.
And if there are threats to the United States, then I, of course, would go back to the president and make a recommendation that may include the use of U.S. military ground forces.
For example, Dempsey said American forward air controllers on the ground in Iraq could call in airstrikes that would help Iraqi forces retake the city of Mosul from ISIS fighters.
It could very well be part of that particular mission to provide close combat advising or accompanying for that mission.
The White House called that a hypothetical scenario and said the president's position hasn't changed.
He revealed that the U.S. commanders have already sought permission to deploy small teams of U.S. advisors into battle with Iraqi troops. Dempsey also suggested that while Obama has held firm, he might be persuaded to change his mind. But after Dempsey finished his testimony, The White House reiterated that the president will not send ground forces into combat.
As your commander-in-chief, I will not commit you and the rest of our armed forces to fighting another ground war in Iraq.
If there are threats to the United States, then I, of course, would go back to the president and make a recommendation that may include the use of U.S. military ground forces.
Now, ISIS, on its part, is also preparing for a U.S. offensive. They put out a Hollywood-style propaganda video, this one showing how they're going to fight the Americans. Like many Hollywood trailers, it ends with words, "coming soon." And one thing that you can tell from this video is how these terrorists really enjoy the fact that America is paying so much attention to them. They see themselves as being on one level with America, and it seems that's exactly what they want. It gives them the sense of power that they're craving.
The U.S. Congress has approved a bill on training and arming Syrian rebels to fight against Islamic State. The bill will be put to a Senate vote by the end of the week. Peace campaigner Michael Schenck thinks that this is a dangerous mistake.
The U.S. administration doesn't have a coherent strategy. If the generals, Joint Chiefs of Staff, U.S. Army Chief are saying there needs to be boots on the ground, and yet the White House is saying there will be no boots on the ground. I don't think John Kerry's speech to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee convinced skeptical senators that use of military force and congressional authorization of use of military force is necessary. Concern in the U.S. government around Congress around arming rebels that we don't know their names, we don't know how to keep accountability of them, we don't know how to track them, I think shows prudence on behalf of some members of Congress who feel like it's a very dangerous game to weaponize people further when they're not even a formal structure.
Opponents of the plan, many of them Democrats, likened the fragmented rebel groups to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, who the U.S. armed in the 1980s only to watch them morph into the Taliban.
Make no mistake about it, we have given arms to every element in this conflict with the notion that somehow the enemy of our enemy is our friend. And at the end of the day, we have no friends in this conflict.
Secretary of State John Kerry returns to Capitol Hill this morning. He told a Senate committee Wednesday that more than 50 countries are in the U.S. coalition against ISIS. Kerry said more could join next week as world leaders come to the United Nations General Assembly. Samantha Power, the United States ambassador to the UN, is with us this morning. Good morning.
Great to be here.
When you first became ambassador, you pushed for airstrikes in Syria. Now we have lawmakers on record supporting engagement in Syria. How do you see this playing out?
Well, the American people, as the polls show, and members of Congress, as yesterday's vote and today's vote will show, clearly support what the president is doing in dealing with a national security imperative. While there is no threat to the homeland, as the president has said at the present, this we have seen with the beheadings of our young journalists and with the expansionist ambitions that ISIL has, their intention to move everywhere they can. And we've seen what will happen to any American that crosses their path. So the president's intention is to use our unique capabilities to support those on the ground who are fighting ISIL in Iraq and the moderate opposition in Syria. Tomorrow, Secretary Kerry will be here in New York. You will see many of those 50 countries speaking about what they're prepared to contribute to the coalition, showing support for the new Iraqi government, which is trying to avoid the mistakes of the last Iraqi government and be more inclusive, so more people want to fight this threat.
You know, you couldn't get that same coalition or that same actions to take down the Assad regime, which killed hundreds of thousands of its own people, and yet you can now get it to defeat ISIS or try and defeat ISIS. Why is that?
Well, without getting into the past, again, that was about Syrian chemical weapons, which the president also deemed a grave threat. And you'll note, again, because of the credible threat of military force a year ago, Syria's declared chemical weapons program has been destroyed and removed. So I think right now what you're seeing is ISIL is obviously a movement that will not stop unless the international community mobilizes together to stop it.
The Journal is reporting this morning that President Obama wants to personally approve any airstrikes inside Syria. What is the thinking behind that?
Well, I'm not going to get into internal deliberations beyond saying that the president, this is our national security at stake. This is a very complicated operation. If the moderate opposition do get the support that we are seeking from Congress, we will have on the ground more professionalized troops who have been fighting ISIL for nearly a year, and that's the important ground element to the effort.
As President Obama readies to make the case against the Islamic State group later this week at the United Nations, the situation on the ground appears more desperate. The militants killed 40 Iraqi soldiers on Sunday, and fighting near Syria's border with Turkey has sparked yet another crisis. By the thousands, Syrian refugees kept pouring over the border into Turkey today, trying to escape fighting near a key border town. Some estimates said more than 130,000 people, mostly Kurds, have crossed in the last 4 days. In their wake, Islamic State militants and Syrian Kurdish militia battle for control of Kobane, known also by its Arabic name Ain al-Arab. Separately, Turkish Kurds clashed with Turkish security forces yesterday and again today as they sought to enter Syria to help their fellow Kurds. And some Syrian Kurdish men who had brought their families to safety queued up to go back to Syria.
We are returning back to fight. We will fight there until the last drop of our blood. If we lose Kobane, it means we lose the region.
Amid the panicked exodus, a Turkish deputy prime minister said more than a quarter of the region's people have already fled. He expected many more.
The total population in the area is around 400,000, and we think that some of those people moved to other places inside Syria, but we still expect an influx of hundreds of thousands of people.
The weekend also brought news that 49 Turkish hostages held by Islamic State militants had been freed. Turkish officials say no ransom was paid, nor was it a military operation. But President Recep Tayyip Erdogan did not rule out that a prisoner swap occurred.
A swap might have taken place or not. 49 citizens have returned to Turkey. We wouldn't trade this for the world. This is not an issue that we discuss. Even if there was a swap, as a president, I would think the lives of 49 citizens are irreplaceable.
Up to now, Turkey has rejected a major role in the coalition against the Islamic State group in Iraq and potentially Syria. This morning, Secretary of State John Kerry suggested Ankara's attitude should change.
Their border is threatened. Their security is threatened. And they are committed to doing this. But they first needed to deal with their hostage situation. Now the proof will be in the pudding, as I said, and we will work with them very closely in the days ahead.
But from the Islamic State's chief spokesman came a call for militants to target Western nations who join the fight.
If you can kill a disbelieving American or European, especially the spiteful and filthy French, or an Australian or a Canadian, or any other disbeliever, including citizens of the countries that have waged a coalition against the Islamic State, then rely upon God and kill them in any manner you can.
Within hours, a splinter group in Algeria posted video of a kidnapped Frenchman. He said he'll be killed unless France quits the U.S.-led air campaign in Iraq. As for the ground war, President Obama signed a bill Friday including $500 million to train and arm a rebel faction, the Free Syrian Army, to fight Islamic State forces. Senior U.S. military leaders have said it could take up to 1 year to train the first 5,000 fighters.
With me now is James Woolsey, former CIA director. And, sir, thank you for your time. It's good to speak with you this morning. U.S. tracks threats against the West by al-Qaida affiliates inside Syria. That's the headline from the Wall Street Journal. What do we need to understand about what's being plotted now?
Well, Fuad Ajami used to say that President Obama reminded him of a constitutional scholar trapped in a crowd of thugs. And these are the thugs in Syria, especially, but other places as well. Obviously, Australia, the terrible possibility that Australians in the next day or so would have seen a number of their citizens beheaded in the streets by one or another extreme Islamist organizations. One cannot be satisfied at all that we're following whom we need to follow if we're focusing only on ISIS. They're one terrible organization. But this is a movement, a worldwide movement of extreme Islam, violent jihadis, and we have to focus on that and not just on the group of the moment.
Who wins between the scholar and the thugs?
We need a lot of very tough scholars if we're going to take on the thugs, and we have to.
If the issue of Syria had not festered for 2.5, 3 years, would we still be seeing this threat the way it is today?
It could have gone better, and Iran is one part of the reason it did not go better, because they have been helping the Syrians. They've been doing everything they possibly can to extend radical Shia groups and support for them into all parts of the Middle East. And I think that President Obama, in one of his moves that did not scare the thugs at all, when he decided not to punish Assad for crossing the red line and using chemical weapons against his own people, I think that helped move along the Syrian and Islamist position in the Middle East a very great deal.
I don't know if you know, James Clapper was speaking this week. He's the Director of National Intelligence, as you're quite aware. He has mentioned now 2 new groups to keep an eye on. One is called the Nusra Front, and that's an al-Qaida offshoot. It seems to be essentially Sunni, operating inside Syria for a couple of years right now. And he has significant concerns about this group emerging and launching attacks outside of Syria. There's another group known as Khorasan.
Yes.
I don't know if they're Sunni allied or Shia allied, but they believe they have a homeland in what is now like northern Afghanistan and the eastern part of Iran. They too are operating. And what Clapper talked about is that this group has shown an affinity for bomb plots. And it's the first time anyone of high-ranking intelligence within the administration has admitted that this group even exists. And that on its face should scare a lot of people.
Well, it should rally us to realize that just because the president doesn't want to talk about a war doesn't mean that we're not in one. We are in one, a worldwide one. And the administration goes to great lengths not to say that. We have to level with one another about what's going on, and we're in a war, a worldwide war, and it's going to get worse. We need to rally for it, spend to be able to fight it effectively, train friends and allies, give the people who deserve it and are trying to help us weapons, not just night vision goggles. We've got a lot of things we need to do.
And you know, too, these groups are competing for attention. I mean, that's what ISIS is doing with these beheadings. Final question. Based on what Congress has passed with regard to Syria, what does the language of that bill mean that the U.S. will do inside of Syria to confront the groups that we just mentioned here?
Well, it's a step in the right direction, but it's a pretty small one, and I think it only lasts as long as the continuing resolution. It was a good vote, and I'm glad Congress passed it. But this is a bare beginning.
Sir, thank you for your time, and we will speak again. James Woolsey, former CIA director in Washington.
Many newspapers have already come out reporting that it could involve bombing jihadist targets in Syria. Now, the White House has ruled out cooperating, too, with the Syrian government, meaning, therefore, any strikes would have to be carried out without permission from Damascus. The Speaker for the House of Representatives says that America, indeed, has got the right to do so.
I think that we need to be going after the terrorist threat wherever it is. And anyone that thinks this is just an Iraq, Syria issue is not paying much attention to what's happening around the world. You know, Rand Corporation came out over the summer and talked about the fact that there are twice as many terrorists now involved in terrorist activities than there were the day the president took office. There's a serious threat here that has to be dealt with on many levels.
Well, earlier, America's closest ally expressed its agreement. UK PM David Cameron said Bashar al-Assad's government was illegitimate and hence the West is not obliged to ask for permission if it wants to send its military planes into the country's airspace. Let's talk about this with political analyst William Doris now to pick it apart a bit further and what might be happening. Hi there, you're live on RT. Thanks for being with us. ahead of Obama's speech, which is coming up in a few hours' time, we think that he's going to authorise direct attacks on jihadists in Syria. Do you think that is what is going to be on the cards?
I think that's exactly what's on the task. I think that Washington, the White House, and the Pentagon are preparing to engage the United States in a wider war in the Arab region. And last year, when the United States was threatening to attack Syria, there was tremendous opposition both in the United States and around the world. So now they're trying to come into the back door, and in this situation, the so-called Islamic State, which is funded by allies of the United States, is playing the role of an agent provocateur.
Well, it's deeply worrying a lot of people, amongst them Russia. This is what Russia had to say about it just in the last couple of days. This is the Foreign Secretary.
There are fears these strikes could not only target Islamic militants, but also the Syrian army, to weaken Assad's position. That would amount to a colossal escalation of the conflict in the Middle East and North Africa.
Sergei Lavrov there. Do you agree with those worries?
I agree with that. I think the United States has not changed from its objective of overthrowing the government of Syria, the way it overthrew the government of Iraq, with the goal of endless conflict and war in the region to justify a continued U.S. military presence and to drive up the profits of U.S. arms manufacturers and U.S. oil companies. Let's remember, in 2003, the United States, the Pentagon created something called the Strategic Support Command. It was a secret unit. The Washington Post and other media wrote about this, whose stated purpose was to infiltrate terrorist groups, prompt them into action, and to create new terrorist groups, all allegedly for the purpose of undermining terrorism. But in fact, what you're getting is a situation like Zbigniew Brzezinski said in his book, The Grand Chessboard, of get the barbarians, which is the way the U.S. Political establishment views the rest of the world, fighting each other.
So let me just get this straight. Do you think this was more of a long-term plan, and ISIS could have been seen to have been coming as part of that? It's really no surprise.
It's no surprise at all. Remember, ISIS, what became ISIS, was introduced into Iraq shortly after the SSC plan I mentioned, to destabilize the Iraqi resistance to the United States invasion and to create a sectarian war in Iraq. That was facilitated by Saudi Arabia. There is no daylight between the U.S. and the Saudis on this. They have a common objective. The Saudis want to maintain their central position in the world oil market, and the United States wants to keep Saudi oil money flowing into the pockets of into U.S. banks and into the pockets of U.S. arms manufacturers. And the destruction of Iraq and the civil war in Syria, which was promoted and created with the support of the United States and Saudi Arabia, all play into this objective.
William, thanks for your thoughts. William Doris there, political analyst. Thanks for being on RT.
And some lawmakers, including Republican Senator John McCain, have questioned the practicality of having the FSA focus solely on the Islamic extremists and not on the Assad government. The chief of the principal political opposition group, the Syrian National Coalition, is Hadi al-Barra. He took over in early July and will address the United Nations General Assembly on Wednesday.
ولا ننسى الأوفياء من أبناء المقاومة اللبنانية ولا ننسى الأوفياء من أبناء المقاومة اللبنانية الأبطال الذين وقفوا جنبا إلى جنب مع أبطال جيشنا وخاضوا المعارك المحور المقاومة واجب الدفاع عن جنوب لبنان. وشكرا لإيران وروسيا والصين سنين ودافعت بحق عن مواثيق الأمم المتحدة في احترام
Alright, we clear? Clear. Engage. Come right. Come
X-ray, PB Stone. Tank 3. All we do, what we do. Light 1 says, as of right now, the 20 white lights that are coming from Mercedes Canal. Roger, sir. I got it. Coming towards this area. What's up, baby?